Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to another episode of the Remarkable Coach podcast. As always, I'm your host, Michael Pacheco. Here with me today, I have Bradley Hamner. Bradley is the founder of Business Growth Curator, a small business coaching company that specializes in working with service-based business owners to help them go from being the Rainmaker to becoming the architect of their business, help them so they can gain clarity on where they want to go, build a plan to get there, and develop the habits that they need to grow their business. Bradley, welcome to the Remarkable Coach.
Michael, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, buddy, I appreciate you making time. I always like to open up the podcast by inviting our guests to just tell us a little bit more about yourself in your own words and kind of why you do what you do. And
I love small business and entrepreneurship, and I hope that comes across as in our conversation. I could talk about business all day long. As a matter of fact, that's kind of really what I do all day long is talk about business. And I feel very mission driven. I feel like my purpose on the earth is to be able to help small business owners, particularly ones that do less than $2 million in top line revenue. I think there's a lot of great consultants, a lot of great coaches out there that help businesses, that do $5-10 million in top line. That's not the world that I know. That's not the world that I spin in, grew up in, with my parents, my father being a small business owner, and then ultimately me being a small business owner. And so I still own businesses outside of my coaching company to this day. I feel like it helps me to make sure that I R&D a lot of things that we ultimately share with our coaching clients. And so test them out and kind of eat our own cooking, so to speak. And so yeah, it keeps me honest. I like to tell a lot of people I'm patient zero, so a lot of the tools and frameworks and concepts that we use, and they all originated with me trying to solve a problem for myself.
nice. I love it. I love it. So, so 2 million and under is kind of your sweet spot. Then is your goal as a small business coach? Are you trying to get people above that, or just help them level up? Kind of what's your big goal when you're working with your companies, your businesses, your clients?
Yeah, ultimately, our big goal is to be able to help them to really be able to fulfill the dream that they have when they first started the company. And so, look, we've got a number of clients that have been able to scale past seven figures. There's a lot of noise out in the marketplace about, scale to seven figures, scale to seven figures. Yeah, well, I've got some businesses that we've worked with that have scaled past seven figures, but yet the owner's working 80 hours a week, doesn't have that's not transferred over to their personal income. Their personal bank balance is not growing. So it's not really always about just getting to a revenue target number. One of my clients that just started his business, gosh, just a few months ago, they did $70,000 in top line revenue. Well, everybody else would look at that and say, doing great. Well, you don't know the full story behind all of that. How much of that was gross profit? How much of that made it to his personal income? How many hours did he have to work to be able to get there? And so there's just so much more to it than that. So really, we've got a client that started working with us that did last year about this time, $4,000 in top line revenue. They'll do $12,000 in the month of January, February, and they're thrilled to death. Right. They just are like, man, I can't believe that this business has been able to grow to that. And so really, we had thought for a long time about optimizing to an outcome of, a certain revenue target, but man, there's so much more to business than just hitting the revenue number. What's the profit number look like? How many hours a week are you working? What is your, personal, just your family like? How many hours are you spending? Are you tied to the desk all the time? Are you working every Saturday and Sunday morning because you don't have enough time? There's just so much more to it than just a revenue number.
It's a great point, man, because there's a lot of coaches and consultants out there who really do focus on that revenue number with their clients, and there's so much happening beneath the sheets or under the hood, if you will, that it's just the revenue doesn't really mean anything if what's happening to get you there doesn't add up, right? And that's like you said, in terms of personal life, the profit margin for the actual company itself. So I like that kind of focus on more than just that top line revenue, just that one number. Like, are you hitting the goals that you've set for yourself as well?
Yeah. I mean, an example, we had an agency that was doing this was a few years ago, about $500,000 in top line revenue. They grew it to $1 million within maybe 12 months or so. And, we were having a conversation and kind of walking through all the wins and like, man, that's so great. This is where you were last year, et cetera. And he shared something with me. He said, yeah, but you know what? Our family income's not going up. And it was because he had not really installed a mechanism that as the business was growing, so would his personal income, right? And so one of our key concepts is to lead yourself first. Well, if you go to Dave Ramsey, what do they say? Pay yourself first, right?
Yeah.
And so he wasn't doing that. And so he wasn't seeing or feeling in his bank account, he wasn't feeling any of the increase in revenue from the business. So the business is doing better. Everybody else is making more money. And they were the last ones to get what was left over, and they were just not making any more money from the business. And so he had to put some in there to be able to make that happen, so that as the business grew, made more money on a monthly basis, so was he and his family, as just kind of an example.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I know it reminds me of, you mentioned Dave Ramsey. It reminds me of the richest man in Babylon, which is, the similar thing is pay yourself first, always give yourself 10%, and then you can use the rest of the money to pay bills and your mortgage and whatever else you got to do. But always take care of yourself first and make sure you're planning for your future and hitting your goals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we, obviously our kind of shtick is that you go from being the rainmaker of your business to becoming the architect of your business. And I believe that oftentimes your greatest strength as an entrepreneur can really become a debilitating weakness in your business. And I think that the thing that, and why I love that area of like 2 million or less, is because generally they have somewhere between 1 and 12 team members in there. And so the business owner is still like highly involved in the day-to-day things of the business, right?
Yep.
They're just heavily involved. And so their charisma, their grittiness, their determination, their just stick-to-itiveness, they're just, I'm going to get this crap done. I just love, right? That's why I love being with founders, business owners, entrepreneurs, is because they are just going to get it done. But the skill set that they needed to get the business off is not the thing that's ultimately going to allow them to be able to really scale. And so they, a lot of times really struggle with making that transition. So some people will call it as working. Oh, you're saying you need to work less in the business and more on the business. Well, look, Michael Gerber shared that with us in his book, The E-Myth. I think the difference is nobody tells us what that actually is. Okay, cool. Well, what does that actually look like in practice?
Right.
How do I get the skill set, the mindset, the tools to begin to kind of make that shift? And that's the kind of things that we try to give a lot of our business owners, because that's what I needed myself. And so ultimately, I thought that the answer to all my problems was just gas pedal down, and I was already going 85.
I love it. I love it. It's oh gosh. Oh shoot, what was I gonna say? I just lost it. That's all right. We'll move on. It'll come back to me. What does being an architect mean for you and your clients in terms of business? How do you help people become that, and what exactly does that mean? And to your point, what does that look like?
I think it's about installing an operating system and installing a structure into the business. Okay, so again, kind of catch buzzwords, phrases people use: systems and processes. Yes, it is systems and processes. It's a structured way of being able to do things so that you take chaos in the organization and you actually bring organization, right? You bring an organized way to be able to do things, from the way that you show up every day, what your ideal day looks like, your perfect repeatable week. How do you set targets, objectives, key results? How do you keep score in the business? How do you attract, develop, and retain A players in a very systematic way? How do you create a marketing plan that actually works? What
Mhm.
is our sales process and system, and is that documented? How do we manage the cash in the business? And so it's really all of those things. I kind of covered our 5 key principles, which is lead yourself first, clarity, alignment, team, and execution. Those are our 5 key principles that we go over with our business owners. That's what we mean by actually becoming the architect of your business.
Okay. Yeah. I like it. Yeah, it makes sense. Do you implement any stuff from like I'm trying to think like there's entrepreneur operating system that kind of helps
Yeah.
people with that. There's
Yeah.
Clockwork by Michael Michalowicz that
Yeah.
kind of helps with that kind of the systems and processes part of it. Do you use any of that kind of stuff or do you have your own systems?
So I used to be an EOS implementer, so I know EOS really, really well. Okay,
Okay.
I was a professional EOS implementer when I first started to get into coaching. Ultimately, kudos to them. They really wanted you to coach EOS pure, meaning they wanted it coached kind of a certain way. Well, for the people that I was working with, some of the things did not necessarily make sense. I'll
Mhm.
give you a few examples. The L10 meetings, that is a great framework to begin with. But what if you don't have an executive team? The people I'm dealing with are not $10 million companies that
Yep.
have an executive team. It's
Yeah.
them and their team.
Mm-hmm.
So their executive team, their leadership team is one person,
Mm-hmm.
not 4 or 5 people sitting around the table. And not only that, there's 4 or 5 people make 150, 200, $250,000. Those are smart people.
Yeah.
That's where EOS is perfect for a company doing, say, 5 million to 100 million.
Yeah.
And then you've got scaling up framework. Okay, well, let's go back on some of those things. I love scaling up. I love EOS. I've read all the books. So obviously was an EOS implementer. Well, Vern Harnish, who was birthing with giants, he started scaling up. He learned a lot of his things from Jim Collins, who obviously wrote the book Good to Great and Built to Last, etc.
Yep.
Gino Wickman, who was he an understudy of? Vern Harnish. So
Okay.
Gino learned a lot of his things. So if you look at a vision traction organizer on EOS,
Yeah.
VTO,
Yeah.
you look at a one-page strategic plan from scaling up, they look very similar, very,
Uh-huh.
very similar. Okay. Well, when I was in EOS, again, most of my clients doing 1.5, 2 million or less don't have leadership teams. I was like, well, this EOS, this doesn't work. I was trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Right.
Okay. Great system, not perfect. And then I started to say, well, I really want to pull this in. And I really want to pull this in. I really love this. This has been super impactful to me. And actually, some of the things I don't necessarily know if I agree with that. Okay. And so, therefore, I started, and that's why the name of my company is Business Growth Curator, is because I feel like we've curated the best of the best stuff. So, is our things always, I could tie back, we've got a thing called a blueprint. Then my program is called Blueprint because what architects use, they use blueprints. And so our blueprints, I can tie it back to and say, yes, the genesis of that is from a VTF Vision Traction Organizer for EOS, but it's better for our clients, and here's why it's better. If you're a business doing $10 million top line, as an example, EOS is an awesome framework. I really do. I had tried to get Gino to come on the podcast. I'm very familiar with it, and obviously, if you're a big company, they're usually running off of scaling up, et cetera. So that's kind of an idea. I'm very familiar with a lot of those coaching frameworks out there. Mike has come on my podcast, 3 times, I think. There's a lot of similarities to kind of how he recommends things, where we obviously differ a little bit in some areas, but yeah.
Right on, right on. Yeah, we at Boxer we run kind of a hybrid EOS system. We actually use we've got a small team. I've got 3 full-time employees besides myself, and we do a kind of a bastardized L10 every Monday. And one thing that I know doesn't really fit for us is you were talking about the Vision Traction Organizer, the VTO. We've tried, going over that and using that in quarterly meetings and such, and it just doesn't make sense for us where we're at, where we're just a little too small,
Yep.
and going through
Yep.
some of that stuff. We're kind of looking around the table at each other like, let's just move on. Skip this part.
That's kind of a good example of that, of really kind of what I'm saying is that it's like conceptually makes a lot of sense. Okay,
Yep.
get it. Okay, so for instance, like core values, we are absolutely big on core values. We call it, we get our clients to work on a core four. So we think you should have four of them. There's some reasons behind that that makes sense. Okay, here's one thing I don't agree with EOS. I don't agree with the 10-year target. I
Yeah.
am a huge believer
Yeah.
of a 3-year vision.
Yeah.
So if you read Cameron Herold's book, Vivid Vision,
Hmm.
if you read Michael Hyatt's book, Vision Driven Leader, it is one of the paramount things that we believe is to get it out of the head of the business owner, down on paper, communicated to the team. Where are you trying to be in 3 years? As a matter of fact, as we record this, I mean, we were 1 month away from being in a global pandemic 3 years ago. Think how fast that has gone.
Hmm.
And so, therefore, you can see where the value of setting 3 years is like that is long enough to get something meaningful done, but it is short enough that, we're not, I'm like, 10 years? God, my gosh, I have no idea where I want the business to be in 10 years. Like that is just so far off. And
Yeah.
so that's an example of where I kind of disagree with some of the stuff that's on the VTO.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree completely. It just for small businesses, some of it's just too big, right? It's too grand.
Mhm.
Because not, I mean, I know for us, we're a small agency. We do well revenue wise, but I have no intentions of moving to Madison Avenue.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like
Yes.
that's just not what we're gonna. That's not in the book. So yeah, doing things like a 10-year plan, even a 5-year plan. Um, there's just there's so many variables between now and 2028. I have
Yeah.
no clue.
Now, I will give you an example. Like one thing I really do like about the way that on this is kind of a blend. They blend the VTO and they blend their L10 meetings with the idea that in there you do an IDS, right?
Yep.
Issue, discuss, solve.
Hmm.
And one thing I really love about that framework is that the concept, if you really actually read that book, and of course we got kind of training on the backside,
Hmm.
was to take an issue and take it all the way. Versus even when I'm working with a client, it's easy to kind of go like, all right, well, halfway it's like, is that good enough? It's like good enough when we move on. It's like, whoa, wait a minute now. Let's close the loop on all of that. Let's get all of that done.
Hmm.
Everybody knows exactly who's going to be doing what, when they're going to be reporting it by. It's going to go into the project, organizer, whatever we're using, Asana or Trello or whatever thing we're doing.
Yep.
And now we can move on to the next issue versus we have so many things we got to cover. Let's just go boom, 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 as fast as we can. And I think it's those type of little things where if you can pull some of the nuances from some of these other programs, EOS as a methodology, et cetera,
Hmm.
that's really where the meat is to say,
Yeah.
no, we are going to follow IDS in our meetings fully. We're going to take an issue, we're going to discuss it, we're going to solve it, and then we move to the next thing. And if that means we get through one thing, then we get through one thing, and that's all we get to.
Yeah. Do you for your clients, so are you implementing ideas like that with like the IDS for your current clients?
Yeah. So we have really four main pillars that we absolutely implement with our clients. And I tell all of our clients, if somebody were to ask you, okay, what were some of the outcomes? What are some of the deliverables that you actually get in working with the Business Growth Curator team and Blueprint? There's four things. One is that you're going to have a blueprint. Two is that you're going to have a plan. Three, you're going to have a scoreboard to keep track of how you're doing. And then number four, you're going to know what your own leadership habits are that you need to have in place, structured into your day and your week to make all of that happen. So again, I'll go over those again. You're going to have a blueprint, which I'll tell you what a blueprint is. Two, you're going to have a plan. Three, you're going to have a scoreboard to keep track of it. And then number four, your personal habits. Okay. So with all of that, let me tell you what a blueprint is. We think of a blueprint as really three things. It's your 3-year vision. It's your 1-year OKRs, objectives and key results. And I can dive into why I love OKRs. Okay. If you want to, a scoreboard. Oh, excuse me. Blueprint is a 3-year vision.
Yep.
Your 1-year OKRs, and then your quarterly targets. Those 3 things. That's a blueprint. So you want to be able to say, this is our blueprint. This is what the finished product looks like. I'll actually give you a visual. I don't know if this is going on YouTube. Well,
Let me,
I'll
I'll enable screen sharing if you want.
This may help some people. So what I'm showing on the screen is a blueprint. It's kind of a sketch, right? Like you get an idea of what that house is going to look like. So if you took this drawing to a general contractor and said, build me that house, they would say, well, I can't build that house off of that. You said, well, that's what it's going to look like. Okay. Well, conversely, if you got the plans, okay, and we use this kind of a metaphor loosely, but it's enough for people to kind of get, oh, that's a difference between a blueprint and plan. The plan says, here's the plan for the electrical, here's the plan for the HVAC, here's the plan for the plumbing, etc. Right? Well, now that general contractor could take that plan and go build the house, but one without the other is incomplete. So if I only have the plan, and then somebody says, well, I don't know, do you like that house? I have no idea. What is that house going to look like? That's why you need the blueprint. Okay. I need to know what the finished product's going to be. I need to know where this business is going. What are we trying to do this quarter? What are we trying to do this year? What are we trying to do over the next 3 years? And can we get that out of your head, the founder, business owner, entrepreneur's head, and get it down on paper so we can communicate it to the team regularly? Those 3 things. But we also then have to have a plan of how we're going to accomplish that, because it's not enough to just say, here's our goals. All right, everybody, does this make sense, everybody? Oh, and I'll tell you what we'll do. Well, I'll throw some money at it too. So if we achieve these goals, we're good. That's not enough. That was what Bradley used to do. So I got really big into, I was in sports, so I got really big into goal setting. Now, I don't use the term goals often, but people kind of resonate with that. But I could set, this is where we're trying to go. I enjoyed the vision planning process. But what I didn't do a good job of is like, okay, what's the plan to make that happen? What's the strategy? How are we going to allocate resources of my time, the team's time, money, all of those kind of things to make that happen? And then how are we going to keep track of it, build a scoreboard, and then what's my personal habits? And so those are what we call the 4 pillars.
I think that that all tracks. How do you get from blueprint to plan? Are you're basically reverse engineering the vision and breaking it down into, here's year 3, here's year 2, here's year 1, here's quarter 4, quarter 3, quarter 2, quarter 1, like that?
Yeah, obviously, when you've got a 3-year vision, you've got 12 quarters. We're not going to try to go ahead and map out all 12 quarters.
Of course.
So the further out you go, this, obviously, the further out you go, the fuzzier it is, right? Yeah. That's less specific, but it's least directionally correct. So if I told you, Micheal, hey, so my 3-year vision ends December 31st, 2024. We're going to be at $100,000 in top line revenue. I'm going to have 100 clients. You immediately would go, okay. Well, the next question would be, well, where are you today? Then I'd say, well, I'm at 50. I'm just making up numbers. $50,000.
And how are you going to bridge that gap?
All right. Well, where do you think you would try to be by the end of this year? I'd really love for us to be at about 75,000. Okay. That sounds good. So we start to get some ideas. What are you going to do this quarter? Well, I really want to try to onboard 10 clients this quarter. So roughly maybe about 3 clients a month. Okay, got it. All right, good. Now, what's the plan to make that happen? Right. Well, what do you mean, what's the plan to make that happen? What's your acquisition channel to do that? We're going to run paid ads. Right. We're going to nurture our Facebook group. We're going to make cold call outbounds. You could start naming through all of the different ways to actually get customers. But that is the specific plan. How are you going to allocate time, money, and your team to make all of that happen. Does that make sense? Like we
Yeah.
try to get very specific because you
Mhm.
can measure that. So it's really those two things together.
I like it. I like it. You mentioned, I want to circle back. You mentioned OKRs, and you mentioned that you would explain it. Why OKRs and not KPIs or one of the other TLAs? That's three-letter
Yeah,
acronym.
yeah, yeah. All right, so this is good. So this was along my own journey. So I was I had used obviously studied as many different like goal setting frameworks as I possibly can. And I had really bought into the idea that you need to have no more than 3 to 5 annual, we'll say, goals. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, here's a very standard thing that people would nod their head to and go, oh, that's a good idea. And that is, oh, you need to make your goals smarter. So what does that stand for? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound. So business owner says, I'm going to buy into that philosophy. I'm going to have 3 to 5 annual goals, and they all have to be smarter goals. Okay. So I'm not going to say who talks about this concept, but the business owner then, when I was doing this, but especially my clients, they would say things to me like, we would be in December, January, and I would say, what do you want to do this year? I really just want to tighten up our customer experience. Like I really want to tighten that up. Well, if you use the smarter framework, not a goal. I say it's not a goal. Can't set that as a goal.
Mhm.
Business owners like, but that's really what I want to do though. But
Mhm.
then they would also say, well, I really want us to nail down our sales process. I really want to nail down our sales process and have it documented, et cetera. Well, can't really set that as a goal because that doesn't fall under the smarter framework. And so what would happen is the business owners coming from a place of this is truly what I want to have happen, but it was getting pigeonholed into we can't do that because that's not using the smarter framework. So
Can I play devil's advocate here for a second?
mhm,
Doesn't that smart framework though force the business owner or anyone who's doing quote unquote smart goals, doesn't it just force them to better define the goal?
it does. It does. This is where, though, I love the OKR framework, okay?
Okay.
Because it's not letting somebody off the hook from the fact that you can't measure it. OKR says, what are the objectives you're wanting to accomplish?
Mhm.
And then a key result is not a key result unless it has a number or something you can measure. So every objective must have key results that says, if we hit these key results, we achieve the objective. So what it does is it allows you to be able to say, we really want to tighten up our sales process. You could set that as an objective.
Mhm.
Then you have to come back on the backside and say, now give me some key results that actually would show that you've tightened up your sales process
Mhm.
or we've improved our customer experience. How will you know that you've improved your customer experience? Well, because we get X number of Google reviews as an example,
Mhm.
or maybe we make X number of sales from new clients we just onboarded. I mean, different businesses are different things. So it does, the OKR framework does do exactly what you're saying. It doesn't let you off the hook from not being able to be specific. You do have to be very specific. Okay.
Mhm.
You can't just say, well, we want to do this and did we or did we not? We have no idea. It's the breaking up of those two that I think is really helpful. So all of
Okay.
our clients now follow the OKR framework. They set somewhere between 3 to 5 objectives,
Mhm.
and then we measure those key results on the scoreboard, which is why, obviously, if you saw earlier, that's where the scoreboard comes in. Well,
Yeah.
what's measured on the scoreboard? Your key results from your objectives. That's how we tie all of that together. Okay. So, what do you say that you want to do? I have 5 key objectives that I want to accomplish this year. What are all of the key results? Here's the other thing about the 3 to 5 goals thing
Huh.
is a lot of times there's a lot of stuff we need to measure, but then we've got to keep them within 5. And they're like, well, I really want to measure this and I really want to measure this.
Mhm.
You can have that measured a lot better in an OKR framework. There's a
Mhm.
great book that obviously impacted me a lot was John Doerr's book, Measure What Matters.
Yep. Yeah, and he's the guy. He came into Google and kind of built all of this in the Google space, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So like, I've got a client here I'm looking at. He wants to sell $5 million worth of securities. He wants to achieve an X amount bonus by the end of the year, and he wants to grow his business by $500,000 in premium. Okay. So those are his three main objectives, but he has 7 different key results. So one key result may impact 2 or 3 or 4 objectives. One key result, one number impacts one number may impact all of the objectives you may have. So that's one thing I really like about the OKR framework, is that one number that you're tracking impacts multiple different objectives, and you're able to keep track of that.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. So, for example, off the top of my head, customer retention, right? Keeping your customer retention high is going to impact a whole bunch of stuff, because you're going to be spending less money on marketing, you're going to be spending less time on sales calls, and you're going to maintain that, monthly recurring revenue, for example.
Exactly. Yep. So let's just say that you were like, I want to increase profitability 10%. Well, one of the key results would be your churn number, right? Keeping the number of customers. Well, that may impact that objective that you have. And then there's other things you may have regarding other key results. You may say, I want to reduce our marketing spend by 3%. That also impacts your profitability objective that you ultimately set at the beginning of the year. So those 2 key results go in to the objective. So it was a big move for me. It made a lot of sense. I started sharing it with, so what I'll usually do, like I said, with everything, is I'll start it with me, right? And I'll say, okay, instead of setting goals this year, we're going to set 3 to 5 goals. Let's do the OKR framework. Worked great for us. Team loved it. Shared it with a client. They loved it, shared it with another client. And so then it was like, this is the thing. This is the thing we're going to do. And so we really love the objective and key result framework. Interestingly, what's the guy's name that was the Intel CEO? I'm sure somebody's listening to this and they can tell. He passed away now, but he was the famous Intel CEO for a long time. So OKRs used to be called management MBOs, management by objectives, and then he added to it to be kind of changed it over in the 80s or early 90s to OKRs.
Andy Grove.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're looking for. Yep.
Well, Google, Apple, and a lot of big companies still run their businesses off the OKR framework today.
Yep.
I don't think there's a lot of things that Apple and Google do that are going to impact my small businesses and my small business owners. But this framework, I think, is one of them. I think this is one where you can adopt kind of how they think about it, and you can do it in your small business too.
Yeah, for sure. And I like it. Is an interesting difference in approach from SMART goals to OKRs, where you're kind of splitting up the process into 2 steps, where with OKRs you're just like, what do you want to get done this year?
That's right.
And then you kind of circle back to that and you say, okay, what is what's your outcome here? What's your result that you're going for in wanting to do this?
Exactly.
And then you can kind of fill in that gap in terms of what exactly it is you're going to measure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing, if you get a business to where, say they are doing $1.5 million, $2 million, and you start to have different teams. So let's say you have a sales team, you have an account manager team, you have a marketing team as an example. So there's a couple of businesses that we have that will have different teams. And so each one of those teams may set their own OKRs, right? They may say, hey, this team has 3 objectives it's trying to accomplish this year. And so all of those together can use that framework to bubble up into ultimately what the company's the company OKRs are trying to do. That's another reason I really like versus company goals and key results. And then you have team goals, and it just ends up being too many goals versus here's their objectives, here's their objectives, here's their objectives, here's the key results they're measuring, here's the key results they're measuring, here's the ones that they're measuring. Really helps. Like I was trying to, we use Notion. So a lot of our clients, all of our clients are really using the Notion template. And so I've got one client that, his target is to hit a revenue of 1.2 million. Well, he's got 3 different departments that have different key results of the revenue that they're trying to hit. All 3 of those they're tracking as key results that ultimately bubble up to that objective of hitting 1.2 million this year.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Nice. I like it. Let's shift gears a little bit, Bradley. Where do you get your clients? How do you market yourself and your services?
So my podcast, we've gotten people obviously we've had the podcast 3.5 years or so. That's one. 2 is referrals. So we definitely get referrals from our current clients who, they're around other business owners. And then 3 is we are running a paid ad strategy. We've got them turned off at this exact moment, but running a paid ad strategy into a booked call. So that's one of the 3 main ways that we do it. We also run a once a month to our email list. We run a once a month webinar called the Rainmaker's Dilemma, where I dive a little bit deeper into that concept. And so people obviously join that webinar and then book a call with us after that. So that would probably be our 4th strategy.
I like it. What's the name of your podcast? If you want to drop that in here and promote it a little bit.
Club Capital Leadership Podcast. The
Club Capital Leadership Podcast.
Yeah, it's a partnership with Club Capital. They do bookkeeping and financials for insurance agency owners. And I was director of coaching with them for a period of time before I started Business Growth Curator. And I started the podcast on a whim, and it's been pretty cool to see how it's grown.
Podcasts are difficult to start, but once you get into a groove, it's 99% enjoyable.
I never knew what this thing was called podcast fading is, but I there's actually been 2 different people I know that started a podcast and they got about 15 to 20 episodes in and they were like, never mind, forget it, I'm not doing this. They got really excited about it. They thought it's super easy just to go into Zoom, hit record, and then throw it on a podcast. And they're like, no, there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah. Tell us about, you mentioned a webinar, you've got a website for it as well. Tell us about the Rainmaker's Dilemma.
Yeah, so Rainmaker's Dilemma is how your greatest strength as an entrepreneur can become a debilitating weakness in the business. Just basically what got you to where you are is not going to get you to where you want to go. And so, the acquisition of skills, skill sets, mindset, and certain tools. And, obviously that's why we call going from being the rainmaker to being the architect of your business. And my program's called Blueprint. I've had it for a couple of years now. I had just previously done one-to-one coaching. I didn't have some desire to get into business coaching. It kind of fell on me on a whim in 2017. I mean, it wasn't something I was like, oh, business coaching, that sounds good, I'll do that and I'll make some money on the side. I was just doing it with a friend, and I just fell in love with coaching. The model we had when we first started was not scalable at all in any way. I had no idea what I was doing, but you cut your teeth and you start to begin to kind of get an idea of like, well, what do I believe about business? You start to formulate your own philosophy about how you think things should be done. And, ultimately you're a product of your own experiences and the books that you read and the people that like you get to meet. And so I started to come up with my own philosophy. And so I didn't have the language back then. This really stemmed from, in 2015, I was really overwhelmed. I hit a brick wall myself, and I was burning the midnight, morning, noon, and night working in my own business. And I was like, this sucks. I mean, this sucks. And I really gave it a consideration of like, I'm not so sure I want to do this anymore. I knew I could go work for a company and make a couple $100,000 a year as a W-2 salary employee. And I thought, well, I mean, I'm either going to figure this out or I'm going to go get a job. And luckily I got around some really awesome people who poured into me, and I started learning about business, and I just really fell in love with the business end of business. And The answer I'd always had was just go sell more. And I realized that I was just running around like a chicken with my head cut off. I had no structure. I had no systems, even though I'd heard about systems, right? It's like, oh, you got to have systems. I thought I had systems. I didn't have systems. I thought I had documented processes. I didn't have that. I mean, I just was wake up every morning and go call people and try to make some sales. There was no rhyme or reason to it whatsoever. And so ultimately I went to the doctor. I thought I was having heart attack. I mean, I was having a panic attack. And I mean, that was a pivotal moment in my life. And I wish I could tell you that it turned around quickly. I mean, it took me a period of time. I mean, it took, 18 months of like, okay, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And so that was one of the worst days, really, because when I went to the doctor, they put me in an EKG machine. And then ultimately they said, hey, you need to go in and see a cardiologist today. And so I did. And I was, I was freaking out more when I was there, thinking that there's something wrong with me at 34 years old and I'm going to have a heart attack. But luckily, guy said, hey, you might want to come back on the caffeine, and you might want to really think about, what you're doing day to day, working so much. And that was a big moment. And so I didn't have the language around, going from Rainmaker to architect. I had no idea. I mean, we just brought that in, a couple of years ago. But that's ultimately what it was. It was like, okay, I've really got to do this a different way. I got to get all this stuff out of my head and get it down into an actual system and into a process. And so there's born the Rainmaker to architect.
Yeah. That's a great story, man. I appreciate you being vulnerable with me and our listeners. I don't think you get to call yourself an entrepreneur unless you've, had some kind of experience like that where you've had to take a good hard look in the mirror and be like, what's going on? Like, am I going to do this or not? Like, I
Yeah.
gotta, I think, I don't know. I think it's part of the journey. Perhaps an unfortunate one, but it's separates the grown-ups from the kids, I guess. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I think the best way to learn is through experience, but it doesn't always have to be your experience.
Sure.
And so if you're able to share with other people your own journey, the things that you've been able to learn, I mean, I just think that's why I love to read. I think, gosh, you've got somebody that's put 5, 6, 7, 10, 20, 30 years of their life to learn what they've learned. And you can buy that for a $20 book, $25 book.
And you can learn that in 300 pages.
That's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
Um,
Now, a lot of the books, could be 25-page white paper, and then everything else is, yeah. But even so, though, I mean, okay, measure what matters is like that.
mhm,
I say this respectfully to him. I
mhm.
mean, he tells a lot of stories. You could read the first couple of chapters and go, I got it.
Yep.
I got it. I understand this. This makes sense. You either buy into the OKR framework or you don't, as an example.
Yeah.
Everything else is, I don't want to call it fluff, but it's just kind of anecdotal to the real core message that's in the book.
Well, and it's communicate. I mean, it's a very human way to communicate, right? We communicate with stories, and so you've got like one idea that you want to communicate, and part of kind of drilling that idea in is to use story, right? And maybe multiple anecdotes, multiple stories to kind of drill in that idea and show, how that idea applies in multiple various situations, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, and then sometimes there's just, I suppose, pressure from the publisher to make the book a little longer. I don't know.
Oh, for sure. For sure. They're like, come on, Michael, we got to get this book up a little bit more. We need some more content from you, and I get that. I mean, I do get that, there's a lot of books where it's like, we're kind of saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I mean, I wish that I had had, there's so many things now. I had 3 coaching sessions today with clients, and I was sharing with them stuff that I thought, man, if I'll give you an example of one in a minute if you want me to, but like, man, I wish I had this 10 years ago. I would be so much further along than I am today. So like one of my coaching clients, I said, how much money on a monthly basis hit your personal bank account last year? And he told me, and we'll just say it's 10,000. And I said, okay, what do you want that number to be this year? Your personal bank account every month, not the business. I'm not talking about setting business revenue targets. I'm talking about your personal. He's like, I have no idea. And I said, okay, 50,000 a month. He was like, well, yeah, that'd be great. But I said, all right, so probably not 50. And I said, how about 5? He goes, well, no, I don't want to go backwards. So, okay, great. So we're somewhere between 50,000 and 5. And so we whittled it down, and he was like, if I got to 12.5 this year, that I would consider that a success. Mm-hmm. And I thought, now what if you every single year could then say, all right, when I bump my pay up, I'm going to bump it up every year. Because see, like just that mindset, if you want to call it, a little bit of skill set of realizing that the business is there to be able to fuel the things that you want to do in your personal life and to support your family. Mm-hmm. I never did those kind of things ever. Mm-hmm. If we had a good month, I took more money out of the business. If we had a bad month, I didn't pay myself anything. Mm-hmm. And to the credit, this business owner shared with me, he was like, man, you know what? Automating my distributions has been a game changer, because I would pay everybody else, and then I would be like, oh, there's nothing left over. And I wouldn't put any into my personal bank account. So it's a little bit of Mike Michalowicz, obviously profit first thing about like he's putting money into his own bank account first, kind of like we talked about. So that's just like one thing for the business owners to be willing to say, okay, how much money, if you're listening to this now, how much money did you make last year on average that went into your personal account from the business? And if that was 5, what do you want it to be this year? 7,500. If it was 20, what do you want it to be? Whatever that number is. If it was 50, it's like, okay, what do you want it to be 60? I mean, there's something, and now what you do with that money, where you invest it, that's for some other people to do. But I think you can use that and reverse engineer all the way back up to then what does the business need to do in order for Michael to make an extra $5,000 a month?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I think there's a lot of business owners out there, myself included in the recent past, who spend a lot of time on the business and just don't take home enough to really live on necessarily.
Mm-mm.
Nope.
And you own a job at that point, and you have a terrible boss. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Bradley, I want to be cognizant of your time and respectful of your time here. I know we're coming up on the edge of the hour. What does a typical engagement with you look like?
So our Blueprint program, we really kind of follow the 3 C's: coaching, content, and community. So we have a coaching program that we meet every Tuesday morning. And we have an awesome community of business owners. I think that's the thing that is the key. It's not me. It's not even the content we hope is good and serves them, but we meet Tuesday morning for an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, 9 to 10:30, 10:45 Central Time. We do that almost every week, 30 weeks out of the year. So we do 3 10-week sprints throughout the year, and we spend 2 weeks on a topic. So we alternate between a masterclass and a blockbuster. We like to say we don't give you homework, because the last thing you need is a bunch of extra to-dos. And so in our blockbuster sessions, we take the concept we learned about last week on the masterclass, and we actually implement it into the business. And so that looks like 30, 45 minutes of thinking time, carved out thinking time, where everybody together is working on the same thing. We go into breakout sessions, discuss it together as a group, and then come back out and have some shares. And so that way you feel like you're actually making some tangible progress in your business. And so we call that program Blueprint. And so If somebody wants to learn more about that, they can go to our website, businessgrowthcurator.com. We've got a assessment on there that they can take, and they can get an idea of their score of going from the rainmaker to the architect of their business.
Love it. I love it. Is there anything that you would like to touch upon that we haven't had a chance to discuss at this point?
Business is really, really hard, and it gets harder. Business is really, really hard, and it gets harder. I think there's a reason why 96% of small businesses never see their 10th birthday,
Mm.
and 96% of those never cross $1 million in top line revenue. Business is really, really hard, and that's not to be discouraging. It's just facts. And so there's things that you can do to be able to bend the odds in your favor. And so we think that our framework gives business owners a lot of clarity,
Mhm.
a lot of clarity. It gives them a tangible plan. We make sure that they have a scoreboard to keep track of it. And then we do as much as we can to help you with your own individual habits, which is why our first principle is lead yourself first. Because when you get better, everybody gets better. And so there's things you can do to be able to beat the odds.
Love it. Bradley, where can our listeners and viewers connect with you online?
Yeah. So probably the two places on social that's best for me is on LinkedIn and Twitter, so that it can connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter. And then again, they can go to our website, businessgrowthcurator.com, if they wanted to learn a little bit more about us and the team and how we support business owners.
Awesome. Bradley Hamner, thank you so much for making time to chat with me today. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and hopefully I was able to provide some value to your listening audience.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, man. And thank you to our listeners and viewers. Check out Bradley Hamner, businessgrowthcurator.com and the rainmakersdilemma.com. We'll have links to everything, of course, on the show notes. So be sure to check them out. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys in the next episode.